Hey, Luke here with catsandcarp.com, and me and my boys Tom and Nate here. We're going to talk to you about fishing lines. Mono versus braid versus fluoro versus all the different types of lines out there. What to choose, when to use it, the works. There's basically four types of fishing line out there. There's monofilament, braid, fluorocarbon, and then there's these hybrids out there. When choosing between these four different lines, there's a lot of different factors to keep in mind. So let's go through some of the pros and cons of each type. Alright, so let's talk about the most common form of line. That would be monofilament here. So I've got a box of Berkley Trilene, 20 pound, 270 yard, high vis mono. Kind of a low end monofilament. $8 for this entire spool. So if you want to get something cheap, monofilament is hands down your best option. Monofilament is typically a half to a third the cost of high-end fluoros and braids. Some of the characteristics of mono are that it's stretchable. This can be a good thing or a bad thing. It can act as a shock absorber, which makes it less likely for the fish to break off. But stretchability also reduces your hook set. So if you're a bass fisherman and you just want to really drive that hook home, then monofilament's going to have some stretch to it. Monofilament also doesn't sink very well. And so if you are looking to try to get your lure to sink down as quickly and as deeply as possible, something like fluorocarbon is going to be a better option. One of the strengths of monofilament is that it's very abrasion resistant. So it handles nicks and dings and scratches much better than braid does. So if you're in a location where there's going to be lots of nicks and dings and scratches, mono often works better than braid. Oftentimes I'll use a monofilament leader when I'm fishing with mainline braid, because I know the end of my line is going to be beat up a lot, and so I make the last little bit of my line monofilament, but then I can have the benefits of braid on the main line. Now, monofilament is also a lot chunkier. It's a thicker diameter, so 20 pound test line monofilament is going to be much thicker than 20 pound braid. It's a huge difference. So, for instance, you can fit a lot more braid on a spool than you can monofilament. This is a blessing and a curse. You can get more line capacity, but it costs more money and it takes more line to fill up the reel. Some other things about mono is that it has more memory than braid does. So once again, this is a blessing and a curse. So by memory I mean is when you kink it up, it stays kinked, so if you wrap braid around an object and undo it, it stays curly. So this can be good for leaders when you want your leader to be stiff so it doesn't tangle up during casting, but it can also cause a lot more rat's nests and line twist. So when you're using a spinning reel, your line tends to get twisted and twisted and twisted, and suddenly you'll start to see these little loops forming on your spool, and you get these rat's nests. It gets worse and worse and worse. You can fix this through a variety of methods, but if you switch to braided line, you don't have to deal with line twist. Alright, so let's talk about braided line. Braided line is about 2 to 3 times more expensive than monofilament, but it comes with some real advantages. First off, monofilament is about 80% thicker than braided line is, so you can get a much thinner line for the same pound for pound. Braided line doesn't have any stretch, so you get much better sensitivity. You can feel what's going on at the end of your line, much better bite detection, better hook set. So there's some real advantages there. The other thing about braided line though is it doesn't have any memory, and so you don't get things like line twist with braided line. Not all reels can handle having braided line attached directly to the spool. When the weather gets really cold and dry, your line will slip on the spool. So a lot of people either take a little bit of electrical tape and wrap it around the spool before putting on braided line, or they'll put a monofilament backing, and then after they get about 100 feet of monofilament on the spool, then they'll attach the braid. another thing to keep in mind is that not all braids are created equal. Braids are, as the name suggests, braided line. So the weave is really important. How many weaves per inch is a sign of quality. Spider wire has a lot more, sometimes triple or quadruple the number of weaves per inch compared to cheaper lines. This is important because a tighter, smaller weave will make for better castability and better durability on your rod. So you might have heard stories about people's eyelets being sawn through by braided line, and braided line ruining the eyelets on fishing rods. That's particularly true with cheap braided line because the weave is so chunky that it's much more like like a saw. If you use high quality braided line, it's much smoother through the eyelets and it won't damage your eyelets. So I've never had any problem with spider wire damaging my eyelets. Also, you get great castability because they put a coating on the braid that for the spider wire Stealth and the spider wire Ultra Cast are both two products that have a coating that make it cast really far. So I'm a huge fan of spider wire, and I've been using it for years now. Additionally, they sell it in these big spools, so I get it in the 1,500 yard spools or the 3,000 yard spools, and that allows me to spool up 6, 7, 8, 9 reels or whatever and save a lot of money. Now, fluorocarbon is one of our newer types of line. Fluorocarbon looks a lot like monofilament, but it's different in a couple ways. First off, fluorocarbon sinks a lot more aggressively than both braid and monofilament. So if you're trying to get your lure down deep quickly, fluorocarbon's the way to go. Additionally, if you're bank fishing, like bait fishing, like cat fishermen and carp fishermen, and you get a lot of boat traffic where people are driving over your line, using fluorocarbon can be a great help because then you put a little slack in your line sinks, and it keeps it out from that boat traffic. So that's a decent thing to do. Additionally, fluorocarbon is see-through, so it's harder for fish to detect in clear water. So if you're a bass fisherman or a carp fisherman or one of these fishing for one of these really tricky sight-based fish, having a really invisible line can be helpful. So in super clear water, fluorocarbon can be a real make or break difference. One problem with fluorocarbon is it tends to slip with knots, and so it has this weird memory with it, and so not all knots work really well with fluorocarbon. But if you do a really high quality knot, generally you're okay. But some people do complain that their simpler knots don't seem to hold with fluorocarbon. Another difference between monofilament and fluorocarbon is the price. So both these boxes are 20-pound test. This is 270 yards, this is 300 yards. This was $8, this was $15. So close to twice the price for fluorocarbon. Some of the brands I like to use are P-Line, and if you it's not too expensive of a fluorocarbon, and Seaguard. I use Seaguard fluorocarbon for my leaders most of the time. So these are two brands that I really like. The hybrid lines, like the Berkley Fireline and the Berkley Nanofile, are really special. They're basically braided lines that are heat treated to fuse them together, so they act a little bit like monofilament and a little bit like braid. They have better abrasion resistance than normal braid, and they have great castability and a lot of the positive features of braid. The downside is it's kind of expensive stuff and it's hard to find in big spools. So this Berkley Fireline Crystal, the 20-pound stuff, at 125 yards, so half the amount as the mono, it's $15. So I'm getting half the line for almost twice the price. So it's pushing 3 to 4 times the cost of monofilament. So it's a really high-end stuff, and it tends to only come in these small spools. One of the reasons why is I find that Fireline really works best for small diameter line. The advantages of Fireline I work best with like 4-pound tests, 6-pound tests, 8-pound tests. I just rarely use it for anything bigger than 10-pound. It works really good on ultralight rods. When you're finesse fishing with, for bass or crappie or bluegill or something like that, it's a thing casts super far and it's really strong. The fire line's unique because it's not a round line. It's shaped more like dental floss. It's like a ribbon, a small, very, very small flat ribbon. The Nanofile is also a great product, but once again, it's best for I find small stuff, 6-pound, 8-pound. So I use it for trout fishing, crappie, bluegill, bass, that sort of thing. Well, hopefully this video gave you some ideas of the pros and cons of the different types of lines. I always tell people, if you're going to spend money on fishing gear, invest it in good line and good hooks, way before you buy expensive fishing rods and reels. If you want to win the 4 boxes of line I used in this video, all you have to do is leave a comment and tell me what your favorite catfishing carp video is. Make sure you're subscribed and share this video on any social media forum, and I'll announce the winner 1 week from today in my next video. At any rate, thanks for watching, and hopefully you liked this video. Have a great day, and don't forget to
click subscribe! Nailed it!